Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving deep into a corner of the Dragon Ball universe today that is, well, absolutely steeped in myth, loaded with this raw, unpredictable power, and frankly, it still holds a few secrets, you know?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know the one, the legendary Super Saiyan? It's this transformation whispered about, like, in ancient texts and legends. A power that strikes genuine fear into characters who are practically gods themselves.
It truly is. It's one of the most enduring mysteries, I
Yeah.
think, and just captivating concept across all the Dragon Ball series and, the media.
Yeah.
This isn't just another step up the power ladder. It
Mhm.
feels, well, fundamentally different, almost like a primordial, um, untamed force.
Exactly. And we've got a stack of sources here, everything from manga chapters, anime details, game descriptions, even some research articles, and some of your own deep dive notes.
Right.
And they really let us explore what the legendary Super Saiyan is all about, according to all these, varied accounts.
So our mission today, really, is to navigate through all of that and kind of extract the essential nuggets for you. What do these sources really tell us about this legendary power?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the individuals linked to it? What are its different forms, characteristics? And that absolutely persistent, fascinating question the sources keep circling back to, who was the very first one?
Right.
We're aiming to give you a clear, informed picture pretty quickly.
Perfect. So let's start by trying to pin down just what the legendary Super Saiyan is based on what these sources are telling us.
Okay, well, at its core, the sources consistently describe it as an extremely powerful and crucially rare Super Saiyan transformation.
Rare. Yeah.
The legend, as it's referenced in the material, states it appears only once every 1,000 years, usually tied to specific users.
Mm.
It's primarily characterized as a berserk state, known for an apparently endless or at least incredibly vast supply of energy.
And one thing that immediately jumps out from the sources is just how many different names it seems to go by. It's kind of confusing.
Oh, absolutely. The naming is a journey in itself, honestly. In the manga, it's often simply called the Legendary Saiyan. Simple enough.
Oh,
But then we see Super Saiyan B-type, Final Form, Berserker Super Saiyan Berserk, Rampaging, Relentless.
wow.
Caulifla in the anime calls it Ultra Superpower. Paragus calls Broly's form the True Super Saiyan. And there's even Legendary Space Super Warrior mentioned somewhere.
Huh.
It really highlights how this form is, I guess, perceived differently by various characters and, in different contexts.
It also feels like the definition gets a little fuzzy sometimes. Like it gets mixed up with or compared to other forms, especially Super Saiyan third grade.
Yes, that's a key point the sources bring up.
Mhm.
Visually, the significant muscle mass. It draws clear comparisons to Super Saiyan third grade. Definitely.
Right.
And in some depictions, particularly with Kale's usage, it's even referred to or seen as, like, equivalent to Super Saiyan 2. So that suggests different interpretations or maybe evolutionary stages of the power.
I found it interesting that some sources trace the concept itself back to Toei animation, citing Super Saiyan third grade as a sort of jumping off point.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the whole hair color debate, gold versus green. That seems to pop up a lot.
That visual distinction is definitely a point of variation across the sources, yeah.
Yeah.
The original DBZ films often showed Broly's hair as green initially, sometimes shifting to golden or, keeping the green for the final form.
Okay.
Toriyama's early sketches and the super manga tend to depict a golden hue for Kale and DBS Broly in certain stages. But then the DBS anime gave Kale that iconic green hair right from the start.
Ah, yeah.
And DBS Broly's ultimate full power state really solidified the green in the film. So yeah, it seems different creative teams had slightly different takes on that legendary look.
Okay, so we've touched on the names, the hair color variations. What else do the sources highlight about the physical appearance of someone in this state?
Well, the most obvious and consistent trait mentioned is the sheer physical transformation. Users experience a dramatic increase in body size and height.
Big change.
Yeah, the sources note Brawley reaching heights up to, 3 meters, which is huge.
Yeah.
This comes with greatly increased muscle mass, which is where that visual similarity to Super Saiyan third grade comes in again.
But there's a nuance mentioned for female users like Kale, right? That their
Right.
muscle gain is more proportional.
Exactly. The sources observe that distinction. Female users in this state seem more uniformly bulked up, rather than that sort of top-heavy look you sometimes see with third grade.
Okay.
Beyond size, the eyes are a major indicator. Pupils and irises often vanish completely, leaving this blank, sometimes glowing white or red look.
Gives it that really intense look.
Definitely that sort of maniacal look the sources describe. Though it's noted sometimes, like with DBS Broly when he's using the wrathful state too, the yellow eyes can still be visible.
Interesting detail.
And there's also consistent mention of a paler skin tone during the transformation.
And how the transformation actually happens visually seems to vary too, doesn't it?
Yes, that's another point. Some sources describe it as the power violently bursting forth in the body, like a chaotic eruption. We see that with DBZ Broly and Kale's initial or final berserk states.
Right, very explosive.
But in other cases, like Bio Broly or maybe DBS Broly's earlier stages, it's presented as a simpler, though still dramatic, growth in size and muscle.
Less
Bursting.
fascinating how the manifestation itself isn't uniform. So given these characteristics, who are the individuals that these sources actually link to this legendary power?
Well, the list isn't long, which definitely reinforces the rarity aspect.
Yeah.
The most prominent are clearly Broly across his various incarnations, DBZ, Future, DVS, Cameron Kale from Universe 6. Bio Broly, being a clone, is also included. Then you have fused characters or game-specific ones like Kefla, Janemba in his Broly form, Caroly Black. And significantly, Yamoshi is repeatedly mentioned as the likely or presumed original Legendary Super Saiyan from ancient lore, which brings that historical aspect right into play.
Yamoshi, right. So how do they actually reach this state? Is there a single trigger, or are there different paths mentioned in the sources?
The sources point primarily to intense emotional catalysts, often related to trauma or just extreme emotion.
Makes sense for science.
Very much so. For Kale, it was a mix of intense sorrow initially and later just extreme anger directed at Frieza. DBZ Broly's power is tied to his birth trauma, surviving planet Vegeta's destruction. And his rage towards Goku is a recurring trigger, obviously.
The Kakarot obsession.
Exactly. DBS Broly initially transformed while already in his wrathful state, driven by fury. Though the source clarified that being wrathful isn't necessarily a requirement for all users, it seems extreme psychological pressure or emotion is the consistent factor, really.
And the power itself. The sources repeatedly emphasize its immense level, like off the charts.
Immense is almost an understatement. It's described as far, far surpassing a standard Super Saiyan. Now, one older guidebook reference does suggest it might be weaker than Super Saiyan 2.
Oh, interesting.
But the practical examples shown across different media often demonstrate power exceeding that comparison. It depends heavily on the specific user and, maybe, their mastery.
Okay.
DBZ Broly on New Planet Vegeta, for instance, was stated to have a power level around 1.4 billion.
1.4 billion at that time in the story. That's just astronomical.
It really was an almost unimaginable number back then.
So what kind of feats do the sources describe this power enabling? What can they actually do?
The examples are pretty stark. DBZ Broly could effortlessly dodge combined attacks from Goku and Piccolo simultaneously. He could tank powerful attacks from multiple Z-fighters without even flinching.
Just shrug them off.
Pretty much. Sources estimated him at least twice as strong as any individual Z-fighter there. Kale in the Super anime was able to overpower Super Saiyan Blue Goku. Though, admittedly, it's implied Goku was holding back to test her.
Right, testing her potential.
But the Super manga depicts Kale breaking perfected Super Saiyan Blue Goku's guard and knocking formidable opponents like top and perfected Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta right out of the arena.
That's serious power.
Absolutely. And DDS Broly is shown overwhelming both Super Saiyan Blue Goku and Vegeta, fighting Golden Frieza for a full hour alone and winning decisively.
That Golden Frieza point is particularly striking. An hour of sustained combat and coming out on top against Golden Frieza.
Yeah, it really underscores the sheer endurance and power level. And he even went toe-to-toe with Super Saiyan Gogeta initially in the film.
Incredible. Are there other unique physical advantages mentioned besides the raw power?
Yes, sources for Broly specifically mention enhanced regenerative abilities, or like a healing factor, which helps him recover from damage remarkably quickly.
Handy.
Very. In terms of fighting style, it's described as heavyweight, almost a brawling approach, relying on crushing physical moves, grabs, overwhelming force, rather than, say, speed and intricate combos.
More brute force.
Exactly. And of course, the energy itself has that unique green color associated with it. Though, interestingly, Paragus' key attacks were also green, even before Broly transformed. Bit of a quirk there.
Okay, so incredible power, massive energy, unique abilities. But the sources also make it very clear that this power comes with some serious, inherent drawbacks. It's not all upside.
Absolutely not. It's definitely not a clean, controlled power-up. In Universe 6, as one source points out, it's even known colloquially as a demon Saiyan state.
A demon Saiyan. Wow.
Yeah, because of its uncontrollable nature. The power does seem to grow constantly while the user is in the form, but this unchecked growth is also a danger. The manga sources suggest that if it's not vented or controlled, this internal power surge can actually destroy the user from within.
Burn themselves out, literally.
Potentially, yes. Yeah. Trying to vent that energy in massive bursts causes significant fatigue and physical strain. Sometimes it appears as steam, and early users could even pass out from the strain, according to some accounts.
And that massive muscle mass, which gives it such raw power, that also seems to be its Achilles heel, right? Much like with Super Saiyan 3rd grade.
Exactly. The sources note this shared vulnerability. While visually imposing and incredibly powerful, the sheer bulk can make the user's movements more predictable, potentially easier to evade even with immense speed because it hinders agility and fluid combat, just like the flaws of Super Saiyan 3rd grade.
So power at the cost of agility.
And the manga also adds that if the form pushes the user past their physical limits, if it starts affecting their health, their power and speed can drop drastically.
Okay, that makes sense. And probably the most significant drawback is what it does to the user's mind, isn't it?
Without question, the sources consistently portray the user being almost entirely overcome by rage.
They're wrong.
There's little to no judgment or control. They become a rampaging monster driven by a simple lust to destroy and kill.
Pure destruction mode.
Pretty much. We see this clearly with Kale and her initial transformations, and with DBS Broly. They just indiscriminately attack anyone nearby, even allies. It's a state of pure, untamed instinct and fury.
So it sounds like a ticking time bomb of power, really. But the narrative has evolved, hasn't it? The sources show that some users have found a way to rein it in somehow.
This is where the concept of controlled versions emerges, and it marks a really significant development. Kale is the prime example here.
Right, she gained control.
She eventually achieved a controlled state. Sometimes it's referred to as true Legendary Super Saiyan, or even categorized as Super Saiyan 2 in some game sources, interestingly. This was about gaining mastery over those berserk impulses. Similarly, in the DBS manga, after training with Beast Gohan, DBS Broly is shown developing a controlled variation. It allows him to fight with immense power more deliberately, though he's still shown to be outmatched by truly top-tier opponents in those controlled forms. Still learning.
So progress, but maybe not the final answer yet. Beyond just control, the sources also hint at or depict other variations in hybrid states involving the legendary power, right?
Yes, the lore has definitely expanded to include several documented enhancements or fusions.
Yeah.
For Kale in the manga, there's a powerhouse state mentioned. It's very bulky and seems to share those third-grade speed issues we talked about.
Okay.
DBS Broly has his full power state in the film, which is presented as his ultimate green-haired form. That's distinct from the manga portrayal, interestingly.
Right, film versus manga differences.
Then there's speculation or depiction in games of potentially higher levels, like equivalents to Super Saiyan 2, 3, or even combining with God Ki.
Wow, God Ki LSS.
Purely theoretical or game-based, but it's out there. And then you have exciting hybrid states fusions like Kefla, who's a mix of Super Saiyan, Legendary Super Saiyan Power, or Caroly and Caroly Black in the games.
Fusion potential, yeah.
And even theories linking the Great Ape form to the Super Saiyan 4 line in non-canon material. Plus, dark magic or key enhancements in games show corrupted versions too. Lots of variations.
All of that complexity, all these variations and control attempts leaves us right to the point that feels like the deepest part of this dive. The enduring mystery that the sources themselves highlight. Who was the very first Saiyan to achieve this mythical state?
This is where the legend is deliberately vague, I think. And the sources really reflect that ambiguity. The question is posed explicitly. If this power appears once every 1,000 years, tracking back through history, who was that individual who first broke through and manifested it?
The name that immediately comes up, especially based on just raw power displayed, is Broly, right?
He's the most prominent, undeniably powerful modern user linked to the legend. Absolutely. But the sources themselves, particularly in the context of the more recent material, immediately introduce that nuance. Is he truly the first ever? The one the legend spoke of millennia ago? Or is he simply an anomaly in the current era? A unique case of extraordinary power that resembles the legend. The new movie emphasizes his unparalleled strength, but it doesn't definitively answer if he's the historical first. Leaves it open.
Then you have the surprising inclusion of Bardock, Goku's father, as a contender based on some material, which always felt a bit out there to me.
Well, this theory largely stems from non-canon spin-offs, like the episode of Bardock special.
Oh, okay. Non-canon?
Right, where he travels back in time and awakens the Super Saiyan transformation, maybe implicitly the legendary one, against a powerful foe, Chilled. The sources referencing this raise the question, could he have been the individual who historically breached that power barrier first, maybe setting the stage for the legend? Or is this simply a character detail used in those specific stories to connect Goku's lineage to the ancient power? It's significant that these transforming stories for Bardock often exist outside the main primary canon. So it's debatable how much weight it carries for the core legend.
And finally, the sources present these broader, more speculative theories that go beyond specific individuals, the really big picture ideas.
And these are perhaps the most intriguing, I think. One theory speculates that the very first LSS wasn't just a random, powerful Saiyan, but perhaps an ancient Saiyan deity who first manifested this power.
A deity.
Yeah, suggesting a possibly divine origin, or a power that was inherent to the race at its mythical beginnings. Something more fundamental.
Okay.
The other major theory is that it's not about a single individual appearing every 1,000 years at all, but rather that the legendary Super Saiyan power is a dormant potential that exists within the genetic code of all Saiyans.
Whoa.
Lying dormant, just waiting for the absolute right catalyst, a perfect storm of extreme circumstances to erupt.
That last one is a complete game changer. That shifts it from being like a unique destiny for one person per era to a latent, terrifying potential just sitting inside the entire race.
It fundamentally alters how you view Saiyan potential, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If it's dormant within all of them, what specific conditions are needed to unlock it? Does it require trauma, specific genetic markers? Just an unbelievable surge of raw emotion. The sources leave that tantalizingly open.
So we've really journeyed through the sources here, defining this incredibly raw, often unpredictable power, looking at the specific individuals who wielded it across different timelines and media, exploring its physical forms, the significant dangers it presents, and grappling with this persistent mystery of its true origin story.
It's clear this isn't just any transformation. Its immense power and its chaotic nature are what make it legendary, right? The subject of ancient whispers. The fact that it's tied to unpredictable appearances rather than lineage or specific training paths like other forms makes it fundamentally different and frankly terrifying in the Dragon Ball universe.
And thinking about the evolution we saw in the sources, from Broly's pure berserker rage to Kale and DBS Broly developing these controlled versions, what does that tell us about the Saiyan drive for power, according to these sources? Is it just about getting stronger?
That's a great point. It highlights that while raw power is definitely their instinct, the Saiyan pursuit isn't just about getting stronger. It seems it's ultimately about achieving mastery.
Control.
Exactly. Even the most volatile, destructive force is something they seek to control, to direct rather than be consumed by. Kale's control, transforming the berserk state into something more focused, and DBS Broly's ongoing struggles for control. They demonstrate this inherent drive to harness their full potential, even if the legendary state remains incredibly difficult and dangerous to fully tame.
And that mystery of the first LSS, what does the vagueness and all the competing theories say about how history and legend function in the Dragon Ball universe itself?
Well, it shows that even in a world with incredibly powerful beings and relatively clear timelines sometimes, some origins remain shrouded in myth. It's part of the appeal.
Keeps things interesting.
Definitely. The varied candidates, a specific individual like Yamoshi or Bardock, maybe a deity, or this latent racial potential idea, allow the legend to serve different narrative purposes across different stories. It keeps the past alive as a source of potential revelations or future conflicts. It reinforces that the full scope of Saiyan power and history might still hold surprises. And it invites you, the listener, to consider which interpretation resonates most based on all the different accounts we have.
It certainly gives you a lot of layers to peel back and think about beyond just, who punches harder.
Absolutely. The legend is almost as powerful as the form itself in some ways.
So here's something to really chew on, then, pulling together the varied depictions and the fascinating theories about its origins from these sources. Given that we see different hair colors, similarities to other forms like Super Saiyan 3rd grade or even SS2, and this whole debate about whether it's a unique event or a latent potential, is the legendary Super Saiyan best understood as, like, A random, rare genetic mutation that just happens to appear across millennia, perhaps tied to specific individuals? Or is it perhaps the true, primal, maybe instinct-driven form of the Super Saiyan state itself? Something that requires those specific, overwhelming circumstances, that perfect storm of emotion or trauma, to simply be unleashed from the deepest parts of any Saiyan's genetic code. What do you think?